Hello there, and welcome back. Tonight, let us move slowly through every boss of Hollow Knight, Silksong, not as a frantic rush of attacks and endings, but as a soft walk through Farloom's trials. Each boss in this kingdom is more than a creature standing in the road. Some are guardians, some are mothers, some are performers, some are judges, some are old rulers, ruined friends, infected memories, or living pieces of a system that has been singing too long. Hornet climbs through a country where silk binds bodies, bells mark passage, and song can become both prayer and prison. So every fight becomes a little conversation with the place around it. The bosses of Silksong also tell the story of Hornet herself. She enters Farloom as a captive, not a pilgrim, and every challenge teaches her a different language of survival. Moss teaches patience, bone teaches weight, heat teaches speed, wind teaches trust, rain teaches endurance, the citadel teaches suspicion, the abyss teaches silence. By the time the late bosses appear, the fights are no longer simple obstacles. They feel like echoes of the whole kingdom turning back toward Hornet, asking whether she can keep her shape when every road wants to pull her into something else. The first boss most paths remember is Moss Mother, deep in the ruined chapel beneath Moss Grotto. She's not grand in the way later bosses are grand. She does not arrive with the gold of the citadel or the terror of ancient kings. She's a living mass of moss, wings, brood, and old chapel air, a creature that has made a sacred ruin into a nest. That makes her perfect as an opening trial. She tells us that Farloom's holy places are not empty museums. They are being occupied, eaten, slept in, and reclaimed by life that does not care what the stones once meant. Moss Mother's fight has a maternal strangeness to it. She protects, summons, lunges, and fills the chapel with the feeling of something old and earthy defending its brood. Hornet is not only cutting through an enemy, she's disturbing a place where worship has softened into moss and instinct. The fight is small compared with what waits above, but it contains the whole kingdom in miniature. Abandoned devotion, living growth, and violence rising out of a room that once promised peace. There is another Moss Mother encounter in Weavenestatla, and that repeated presence changes how she feels. The first Moss Mother belongs to Chapel and Grotto, but the second appears in a place tied to Weaver craft, old machinery and hidden lineage. Suddenly the boss is not just an early creature. She becomes a reminder that Farloom's natural life seeps into the ruins of designed worlds. Moss covers stone, silk covers mechanisms, and bodies adapt to whatever shelter they can claim. Meeting a Moss Mother again makes the kingdom feel connected beneath its separate rooms. The second Moss Mother is also quieter as a piece of lore. She does not need a new dramatic identity to matter. Her repetition tells us that certain forms of life persist across Farloom's forgotten spaces. Hornet may be linked to Weaver history through blood and silk, but even Weaver places are not protected from moss, hunger, and nesting creatures. The boss becomes less like a single monster and more like a type of survival. That is a gentle but important idea for the early journey. The world was here before Hornet arrived, and it has been making homes out of ruins for a long time. The Bell Beast is one of the first truly memorable bosses because it is both opponent and future companion. Trapped in the arrow, bound by silk, massive and furious, it does not feel like a villain. It feels like a creature caught inside another creature's system. The fight begins as danger, but beneath that danger is captivity. Hornet has been captured too, so the Bell Beast's rage has a strange sympathy inside it. Two trapped beings meet in violence before one of them can be freed. After the Bell Beast is defeated, it becomes part of Farloom's travel network, carrying Hornet between stations. That transformation gives the fight a rare tenderness. A boss that seemed to block movement becomes the one who makes return possible. In many games, defeating a boss simply opens a door. Here, the defeated beast becomes a road. That makes the encounter feel less like domination and more like release. Hornet does not tame Farloom by killing everything in front of her. Sometimes she changes the relationship between herself and what was bound before her. The Bell Beast also introduces the importance of bells as living infrastructure. Farloom is full of sound, but sound here is not always music in the soft sense. It is signal, command, summoning, travel, judgment, and memory. The beast is part of that ringing world. It carries the deep physical side of bells, metal, weight, vibration, bodies moving through tunnels. Later, when the Citadel's grander songs appear, the Bell Beast remains a low, grounded reminder that even a holy kingdom needs creatures strong enough to carry people home. Savage Beastfly appears first in the Chapel of the Beast, and its name is wonderfully plain. It is not a masked judge or an ancient ruler. It is savage, winged, territorial, and direct. In a kingdom where so many enemies are wrapped in silk, ritual, or performance, the Beastfly's danger feels honest. It moves like something that does not need ideology. It attacks because that is what its body and place demand. The Chapel of the Beast gives this fight its deeper flavour. A chapel named for beastliness suggests that Farloom once gave sacred attention to forms of life outside polished citadel religion. The savage beastfly is therefore not just an animal in a holy room. It is almost an emblem of a forgotten kind of worship, wild, physical, without gold or choir. Hornet fighting it is like meeting a faith that had wings and teeth before it had doctrine. When savage beastfly appears again in far fields, the second encounter feels brighter and more open. The wind of far fields changes the meaning of its movement. Instead of the close sacred danger of the chapel, the beastfly becomes part of a broad region where air itself is a path. The repetition does not feel like a mistake. It shows how the same creature can mean different things depending on where it beats its wings. In one place, it is a chapel's guardian spirit. In another, it is a piece of the sky's restless life. Sister Splinter belongs to Shellwood, and she carries the sharpness of that forest in her name. Splinter suggests wood, pain, and something small lodged under the skin. She's not only a boss to overcome, but a concentrated expression of Shellwood's personality. The forest is lush, but it hurts. Its flowers can help or deceive. Its roots can guide or trap. Sister Splinter feels like that whole logic given a body. Her fight draws attention to how Silksong often builds bosses from the grammar of their locations. Shellwood is not a neutral stage with a boss placed inside it. The forests, bramble, ponds, flowers, and mimicry prepare the mind for a figure like Sister Splinter. She feels grown from the same soil. That is why the encounter can be remembered not only as a duel, but as the moment the wood itself gathers its thorns and answers Hornet directly. The Widow of Bellheart is one of the most important Act 1 bosses because she is tied to a town suffering. Bellheart, the thread-spun town, can be found suspended in silk, its people trapped, and its doors closed. The widow sits at the centre of that stillness like the source of a curse. Her fight is not simply about opening the route forward. It is about returning breath to a place that has been held in silence. The name Widow carries loneliness, grief and predation at the same time. It suggests loss, but also spider-like danger, a figure wrapped in thread and absence. Belheart's entire mood changes around her defeat. Afterward, the town becomes more alive. Shops reopen, wishes appear, and the bells feel less like decorations on a tomb. That makes the widow different from a boss who only guards an item. She's a knot in the social life of Farloom. Cut the knot, and a whole town begins to move again. There is a soft sadness in that fight, because the widow's silk is not merely webbing. In Farloom, silk is identity, power, captivity, inheritance, and song made physical. To be trapped in silk is to be held by the kingdom's deepest force. Belheart's rescue foreshadows the larger struggle against Grandmother Silk, but on a human scale. Before Hornet challenges the divine centre, she frees a town from a smaller version of the same binding. Moorwing belongs to Greymoor, and the name feels like rain-dark wings over wet fields. Greymoor is one of the kingdom's great middle regions, full of mist, dilapidated towers, water, crawbugs, and haunted former tenders of the land. A boss like Moorwing fits naturally there. It feels less like a creature from a clean arena, and more like something risen from damp fields and old weather. The fight with Moorwing carries Greymoor's sense of melancholy. Winged bosses can feel graceful, but here the grace is soaked and shadowed. The area around it suggests a land that was once tended, perhaps farmed or cared for, and now has become haunted by the remains of that care. Moorwing's presence makes the sky of the cavern feel heavy. It is not only blocking Hornet, it is the shape of Greymoor's weather gathered into movement. Moorwing also helps the journey feel wider. After early chapels, moss, bone and wood, Greymoor introduces a middle world where nature and ruin are no longer separate. Towers rot into rain. Bugs that once tended the land become threats. The boss becomes part of that transformation. It is not a royal guardian, not a religious judge, not a machine. It is a wet-winged sign that a place once cared for can become dangerous when abandoned to grief. The fourth chorus appears as one of the early boss names that points directly toward Farloom's obsession with music. A chorus is not a single voice, it is a collective voice, an ordered sound, a body of singers becoming one shape. The fourth chorus suggests hierarchy, ritual, and perhaps a fragment of the greater choir that haunts the citadel. Even before Hornet reaches the golden halls above, the idea of organised song begins to stand in her way. What makes the fourth chorus interesting is the way its name turns combat into a musical image. A fight in Silksong can be read almost like rhythm: jumps, lunges, pauses, dodges, strikes, recoveries, and brief rests between patterns. A boss named as a chorus makes that relationship explicit. Hornet's needle is not just a weapon. It is an instrument answering a hostile arrangement. The fight says that in Farloom, even danger may be written like music. The fourth chorus also hints that the citadel's influence reaches far beyond its upper chambers. If chorus and song appear before the final ascent, then the kingdom's central system has already spread through the roads below. The boss becomes a little ambassador of the larger problem. By defeating it, Hornet is not simply passing a local trial. She's beginning to interrupt the kingdom's habit of turning living beings into voices inside a structure they may not understand. Lace's first fight in Deep Docks is one of the cleanest contrasts in the game. Hornet meets elegance inside heat. Deep Docks is metal, lava, labour, flint beetles, machinery, and the practical underside of Farloom's economy. Then, Lace arrives with poise, grace, and sharp theatrical confidence. She feels almost too refined for the Forge, which is exactly why the encounter works. The arena becomes a stage where beauty cuts through smoke. Lace is not merely an enemy, she's a rival, a mirror, and a question. Hornet is fast, precise, proud, and born from silk. Lace is also fast, precise, proud, and tied deeply to Farloom's own structures. Their duel is not the same as fighting a beast or a judge. It feels personal before the story has fully explained why. Lace challenges Hornet as if she recognises something worth testing, and that recognition gives the fight an electric charge. The Deep Docks version of Lace also gives her an early role as Threshold Guardian. After the Lower Kingdom has taught Hornet the basics of survival, Lace tests whether Hornet can handle a more intelligent, more stylish kind of threat. Her attacks are not only force, they are posture, rhythm, and insult. That makes her feel alive in a way many bosses do not need to be. She's aware of the duel as a duel, and her awareness pulls Hornet into a different level of the journey. Phantom is another early boss whose name points toward the kingdom's haunted nature. A phantom is not simply a creature, it is an absence with shape, a memory that moves, a thing seen where perhaps nothing should remain. In a land like Farloom, full of old chapels, ruined towns, silk-bound bodies, and songs that outlive singers, a boss called Phantom feels completely at home. The strength of a phantom-like boss is atmosphere. It makes the fight feel less grounded than an animal charge or a weapon duel. Hornet is not just meeting bodies in Farloom, she is meeting residues. The kingdom has events it cannot finish, prayers it cannot silence, and forms of life that may be half memory already. Phantom's place among the bosses broadens the emotional register of Act 1. Farloom can hurt with teeth, but it can also hurt with the shape of something that should have passed on. This boss also helps prepare for later memory spaces and lost versions of characters. Silksong's late story will move through red memory, old hearts, and corrupted returns. A phantom in the early list quietly opens that door. The kingdom is not only vertical, it is temporal. Past events keep interrupting the present. Hornet climbs upward, but she's also moving through remains. Great conch flies are one of the stranger early boss encounters, because the name feels almost comic until the fight gives it weight. Conch flies belong to the insect shell language of Farloom, where small creatures often have an odd dignity. A conch suggests spiral, shell, sound, and sea memory, while fly suggests speed and irritation. Put together, they become a boss that feels both natural and slightly absurd, which is very much in the spirit of Hollow Knight's world. The great conch flies remind us that not every boss needs to be tragic or divine. Some are simply large, dangerous expressions of local ecology. That matters for the pacing of the journey. If every fight were a fallen ruler or corrupted saint, Farloom would become too heavy. The conch flies give the world texture. They say that ordinary wildlife can still be enormous from Hornet's small point of view, and that the map is not only built from lore, it is also built from bodies trying to survive. Later, the raging conchfly gives this same creature type a different emotional temperature. The word raging turns a strange natural enemy into a more violent pressure point. By then, Hornet has climbed farther, and the repeated conch-fly idea can feel like a reminder of how early hazards return in harsher forms. Farloom often teaches by variation. A shape first met as an early trial comes back angrier, faster, or more desperate, asking whether Hornet has truly learned the language of its movement. The last judge stands at the threshold of the citadel, and few bosses have a name that says so much. Last judge suggests final evaluation, moral authority, and the closing of a road. Hornet has crossed moss, bone, heat, wind, rain, bells, and ruins to reach the grand gate. And then the judge stands there as if all movement must be weighed before it is allowed to continue. Judgment in Farloom is never clean. The citadel calls pilgrims upward, but it also sorts, punishes, and redirects them. Some are sent toward song, some toward work, some toward prison, some toward death. The last judge embodies that cruelty at the gate. The boss is not merely protecting a door. It is protecting the idea that the citadel has the right to decide who is worthy of entering its golden lie. The fight with the last judge carries the feeling of a trial more than a brawl. Hornet is not a normal pilgrim, and the judge's authority does not quite fit her. She's not climbing because she believes the citadel's promise. She's climbing because she's been dragged into Farloom's web and refuses to be shaped by it. Defeating the last judge therefore feels like breaking through a moral checkpoint that never had the right to name her in the first place. Skull Tyrant belongs to the Act 1 boss list, with a name that feels heavy and old. A skull is death made visible. A tyrant is power without mercy. Together, the names suggest a ruler whose authority has been stripped down to bone and still has not released its grip. In a kingdom where the marrow and bone bottom already make ancient remains part of the landscape, a skull tyrant feels like death refusing to become quiet history. The interesting thing about a boss like Skull Tyrant is the way it turns Old Death into active danger. Bones in Farloom are often roads, walls, tools and reminders. They are beneath the feet, but a tyrant of skulls gives the dead a commanding shape. It suggests that old powers do not always lie still under new kingdoms. Sometimes they rise as patterns of violence, still demanding obedience long after their original bodies should have been dust. As an early boss, Skull Tyrant helps make Farloom feel older than the Citadel's current crisis. Grandmother Silk and the Haunting may dominate the main story, but the land is full of earlier forms of rule, worship, and fear. A tyrant made of skull and title points backward. Hornet is not travelling through a newly cursed land. She's travelling through a country built over many layers of ruin, and some layers still bite. Disgraced Chef Lugoli is one of the bosses that gives Silksong's world its odd, dark humour. A disgraced chef is not the kind of title one expects beside judges, beasts, kings, and divine silk. Yet the phrase immediately creates a character. It suggests pride, failure, appetite, anger, and perhaps a kitchen where art has curdled into violence. Farloom is not only sacred and tragic, it is also full of strange professions gone wrong. Lugoli's presence matters because food in a pilgrimage kingdom is never just background. Pilgrims need to eat. Workers need to eat. Towns need supplies. Sinner's Road and Muckroach breeding suggest that the kingdom has ugly food systems beneath its holy language. A disgraced chef as a boss turns the practical world of cooking into a theatrical threat. It is funny, but not meaningless. Even the kitchen has been pulled into Farloom's disorder. The fight can be imagined as one of the kingdom's smaller grotesqueries, a reminder that corruption does not always wear a crown. Sometimes it wears an apron, clutches tools, and rages inside a room that should have smelled like comfort. The best Hollow Knight bosses often work this way. They take a humble role and twist it until it becomes unforgettable. Lugoli's disgrace is a joke with teeth. The Broodmother continues the line of maternal and nesting bosses, but with a darker emphasis. A Broodmother is not only a mother, she is the centre of reproduction, swarming life, and bodily continuation. In a world of small bugs, that title has enormous force. It suggests a creature whose danger comes not from loneliness, but from abundance. She is many futures gathered into one body. Broodmother fights tend to carry pressure through summons, space control, or the feeling that the arena itself is filling with life. Even without reducing the boss to mechanics, the name alone tells us what emotional room we are in. Hornet faces not a single isolated enemy, but a source. That makes the encounter different from duels like Lace, or authority figures like the Last Judge. A Broodmother does not need elegance. She overwhelms through the simple fact of producing more life than the room can comfortably hold. In Farloom's wider story, Broodmother also echoes the complicated motherhood around Hornet herself. Hornet is the child of Hera and the Pale King, shaped by sacrifice, silk, and political necessity. She meets mother figures that are nurturing, monstrous, absent, or divine. Moss Mother, Broodmother, Grandmother Silk, and Memory of Hera all pull on that word from different directions. The title Mother never becomes simple in this world. Cogwork dancers are among the most elegant mechanical bosses, and they belong beautifully to the Citadel's machinery. A cogwork dancer joins two ideas that should almost contradict each other: gears and grace. The boss is built, but it moves with art. It is artificial, but not clumsy. That is the Citadel style at its strongest. Farloom's Upper Kingdom does not only make machines, it makes machines that perform. Fighting the cogwork dancers feels like entering a rhythm designed by the architects. Every motion has timing, every hazard feels choreographed, and the body of the boss becomes part of the Citadel's larger musical identity. Song is not only sung here, it is engineered. Dance becomes defense. The arena turns into a clockwork stage, and Hornet must answer with her own living rhythm. The cogwork dancers also reveal something unsettling about beauty under control. They are graceful because they were made to be graceful. They may not have the messy will of a living rival like Lace, but their precision can be just as dangerous. The Citadel has turned art into mechanism, and mechanism into guardianship. That idea will return again and again in the upper areas. The lovelier the surface, the more carefully one should look for the gears underneath. Father of the Flame waits in Wisp Thicket, a small but memorable region built around burning bugs, red tents, wisps, and dangerous devotion. His title sounds religious, familial, and elemental at once. He is father not in the soft household sense, but as a leader of fire worship, a figure around whom heat and belief gather. The fight gives Wisp Thicket a centre. The burning bugs of Wisp Thicket turn warmth into danger. Fire can light a path, cook food, and comfort the cold. But in this place it also consumes pilgrims and creates strange rituals. Father of the Flame stands at the point where comfort becomes cult. His boss fight is therefore more than a local obstacle. It asks what happens when a small community worships something powerful enough to destroy it. Defeating Father of the Flame and receiving the Wispfire Lantern gives the fight a meaningful afterlife. The flame does not simply vanish. Hornet carries a form of it forward. That makes the encounter feel like an exchange with a dangerous tradition. She does not join the worship, but she takes from it a light that can serve her own road. In Farloom, even hostile faiths can leave useful embers behind. First, Sinner belongs to the kingdom's language of guilt. The name immediately raises questions. First sinner according to whom? First in time? First in rank? First in punishment? Or first in some ritual order? Farloom is full of systems that name bugs as sinners, heretics, pilgrims, workers, conductors, architects, and judges. A boss called First Sinner makes that moral labelling physical. The power of this boss is in the way it makes sin feel institutional rather than personal. The Citadel's world depends on naming guilt, and then using that guilt to control movement, labour, and punishment. The Underwork's confession system, the Slab's false forgiveness, and the Judge's authority all belong to the same pattern. First Sinner is not just a guilty creature, it is a sign that guilt has been organised into hierarchy. Hornet facing the First Sinner is therefore not the same as confronting personal wrongdoing. She is confronting a category that may have been created to make suffering seem deserved. That is one of Farloom's cruelest habits. If someone is a sinner, then their pain can be called correction. If their pain is correction, then the system inflicting it can remain holy in its own eyes. The boss name quietly carries all of that weight. The four brothers, Cygnus and Gron, bring a paired boss energy into the story. 2 names, 2 bodies, 1 encounter. Their title suggests fraternity, labour, perhaps guardianship of a road or region. Paired bosses often feel different because attention must divide. A single enemy can become familiar. 2 enemies create conversation, interference, and pressure from multiple directions. Cygnus and Gron also give Farloom another example of relationship inside combat. Not every boss is alone. Some are bonded by role, blood, training, duty, or shared exile. A pair like the four brothers can make a fight feel almost domestic in a rough way. 2 figures used to moving together, fighting together, perhaps living under the same hard rule. Hornet's solitary precision meets a bond already formed before she arrived. The name Four Brothers also suggests that they stand before something, perhaps as earlier guardians, elder figures, or those who came first in a line. Even when a boss's exact background is not spelled out in a long speech, Silksong uses names to imply social texture. Cygnus and Gron are not anonymous brutes. Their names let them remain in their mind as brothers, and that is enough to give their defeat a small, strange sadness. Garmund and Zaza are a very different kind of boss because they are not simply enemies. They are characters with warmth, comedy and companionship around them, a pair whose energy can feel almost friendly depending on where they appear in the journey. When they become a boss encounter, the fight carries a lighter but still meaningful texture. It is not always hate that brings blades together in Farloom. The charm of Garmund and Zaza lies in their partnership. One without the other would feel incomplete. Together they are performance, banter, movement, and a little pocket of odd joy inside a kingdom full of rot. Their boss identity reminds us that combat in Hollow Knight's world can sometimes be ritual, testing, misunderstanding, or wild enthusiasm rather than pure malice. Hornet's Road is dangerous, but it is not humorless. That makes their later corrupted echo, Losgarmond, much more painful. A cheerful or companionable figure becoming lost is one of the simplest ways Silksong shows Act 3's cost. The kingdom does not only produce monsters from faceless enemies, it can warp names that once felt bright. Meeting Garmund and Zaza earlier makes the later loss feel personal, because the map has allowed them to be remembered as more than a fight. Groll the Great sounds almost like a boast carved into stone. The title The Great can be comic, impressive, or tragic depending on the figure carrying it. In Farloom, where ruined kings, old orders and failed holy systems crowd the background, greatness is always a dangerous word. A boss named Groll the Great carries the flavour of someone who wants to be remembered, feared, or celebrated. Bosses with grand titles help fill the kingdom with local legends. Not every legend needs to explain the whole plot. Some exist because every place has its champions, brutes, and names that smaller bugs whisper about. Groll the Great suggests one of those names, a figure whose importance may be large in a local world, even if the citadel above barely cares. Farloom becomes richer because greatness exists at many scales. The fight also invites a gentle suspicion toward titles. The great may be truly formidable, or the name may carry exaggeration, pride, and old reputation. Hollow Knight's worlds often enjoy that ambiguity. A boss can be dangerous and a little ridiculous at the same time. That mixture makes the encounter feel less like a lore entry and more like something from a strange oral tradition. Somewhere in Farloom there was Groll, and Groll was called Great. Lace's second major fight at the Cradle changes everything about her first encounter. In Deep Docks, she was a rival in heat and smoke. At the Cradle, she is tangled with the higher stakes of Farloom's story. The setting is cleaner, stranger, and more ceremonial. White flowers, cages, divine silk, and the sleeping power of Grandmother Silk all surround the encounter. Lace is no longer only a graceful opponent, she's part of the final threshold. The Cradle fight feels sharper because the relationship between Hornet and Lace has had time to gather meaning. Rivals in games often work because they return changed, and Lace does exactly that. Her pride, precision and elegance now sit against a much heavier backdrop. The duel becomes a question of what kind of silk-born figure gets to define the end of the climb. Hornet and Lace are both tied to the world of Thread, but they stand on different sides of Farloom's crisis. There is sadness in Lace because she's too alive to be dismissed as a mere guardian. She feels like someone who could have walked a different path under different conditions. That is why facing her near the Cradle carries emotional tension beyond victory. Hornet is not simply breaking a lock. She's meeting another person shaped by the same kingdom, another blade moving through the same web, and only one of them can decide what happens next. Grandmother Silk is the central divine boss of Farloom, the sleeping force around which the Citadel's song, Silk and Control have been organised. Her name is enormous. Grandmother suggests ancestry, origin, age and family. Silk suggests Hornet's own nature, the weaver's, binding, weaving, creation and restraint. She is not just a final enemy placed at the top, she is the reason the top has meaning. The fight against Grandmother Silk is charged because Farloom has been preparing it from the beginning. Every silk-bound body, every haunted choir member, every trapped town, every weaver ruin, every needle in gate, every strand across the kingdom points toward this source. Hornet's journey is a climb toward the place where Silk stops being background and becomes godhood. To fight Grandmother Silk is to confront the thing the kingdom has been built around, feared, worshipped, and used to justify itself. Yet Grandmother Silk is not simple evil in the way a smaller villain might be. She is bound into a system too. The Citadel's rulers used song and machinery to control or contain her, and the whole kingdom became a structure around that containment. That complexity makes the boss feel more tragic than a clean monster. Farloom has suffered under her power, but it has also suffered from the systems built to control that power. Hornet stands between divine force and institutional failure. The summoned saviour is a boss name full of religious irony. A saviour should rescue, heal, and deliver. A summoned saviour, however, may be an answer called by desperate hands, shaped by ritual rather than true mercy. In Farloom, where faith is constantly tangled with machinery and manipulation, a saviour arriving as a boss is immediately suspicious. Salvation has become something to fight. This fight carries the unsettling idea that hope itself can be weaponized. A community or order may call for rescue, but what answers may not understand gentleness? Farloom's tragedy is not that nobody believes in saving. It is that belief has been bent into systems that produce more suffering. The summoned saviour embodies that bent hope, arriving with the title of mercy and the reality of danger. Hornet's resistance to a summoned saviour fits her role perfectly. She does not accept authority because it uses holy words. She tests what stands before her. If a saviour attacks, binds, or blocks the path, then its title cannot protect it from the needle. That is one of Silksong's clearest quiet lessons. Names can be beautiful and still lie. The Unravelled is one of the most disturbing bosses because the name sounds like a body and soul coming apart. In a Silk kingdom, to unravel is more than to decay. It is to lose the pattern that held one together. The White Word, with its medical instruments, thread experiments, bottles, stretchers, and disposal pits, gives this boss a chilling home. Healing and horror become nearly indistinguishable. The Unravelled suggests the failure of Farloom's attempt to master life through silk. If thread can extend a body, bind a body, or animate a body, it can also distort a body beyond recognition. The boss becomes a warning against the Citadel's arrogance. Not every extension is salvation. Not every preserved life is mercy. Sometimes a system keeps something moving when the kinder thing would have been rest. Fighting. The Unravelled feels like confronting a medical secret that escaped its room. It is not the noble face of the Citadel, not the choir or gold or clean water. It is what happens beneath the ward, where failed experiments and unwanted consequences gather. The boss name does not need gore to be horrifying. A single word unravelled is enough to make the whole body imagine threads loosening where they should never loosen. Trobbio brings theatrical energy into the boss list. His name has a roundness and flourish that suggests performance, showmanship, and perhaps a kind of foolish grandeur. In a kingdom already full of song, dance, and staged authority, a performer boss fits naturally. Trobbio feels like someone who would rather turn danger into spectacle than simply attack from the dark. Performance matters in Silksong because the Citadel itself is performative. Choirs, judges, forums, vault stages, conductors, dancers, and rituals all depend on presentation. Trobbio's theatricality becomes a smaller, stranger echo of that larger world. He may not represent the main power of the kingdom, but he belongs to its obsession with display. In Farloom, to be seen and heard can become a form of force. Later, Tormented Trobio darkens that earlier performance. The name implies that the showman has been damaged, warped, or haunted by whatever spreads through Act 3. That transformation matters because it changes spectacle into suffering. A figure who once seemed colourful becomes a reminder that the kingdom can turn personality inside out. The performance continues, perhaps, but now it hurts to watch. Voltvirm carries a different kind of danger, electric and ancient in feeling. The name joins Volt with worm, suggesting lightning, coils and old serpentine power. In a world of bugs, bells, silk and song, electricity gives a regional boss a distinct flavour. It points toward energy that is not soft like thread or resonant like bells, but sharp, sudden and bright. A boss like Voltvirm helps Farloom feel ecologically and technologically varied. The kingdom is not one tone of moss and gold. It has flame cults, coral deserts, cold mountains, polluted swamps, mechanical cores and electrical threats. Voltvirm belongs to that range. It brings the sensation of crackling danger, a force that can cross space faster than a body expects. The old worm suggestion in the name also connects lightly to Hollow Knight's broader mythic language, where worms imply ancient beings, power, and transformation. Voltvirm does not need to be the same kind of figure to borrow that echo. The name alone makes the boss feel larger than a simple animal. It is electricity with memory behind it, a charged shape moving through the strange, deep history of the world. Second Sentinel sounds like a guardian defined by placement. If there is a second Sentinel, there was a first, and there may be a whole order of watchers, guards, or mechanical protectors. The title gives the fight the feeling of institutional defense. Hornet is not meeting a wild creature. She's meeting a post in a system. Sentinel bosses are interesting because they do not need personal hatred. They block because blocking is their function. That kind of enemy can be colder than a beast. A beast may attack out of hunger or fear. A sentinel attacks because the rule says no passage. Farloom is full of such rules, gates, judgments, keys, melodies, stations, prisons, and locked wards. The second sentinel stands in that broader architecture of denial. The fight also asks Hornet to overcome not just strength but permission. A sentinel is a living or constructed refusal. It says the road is not yours. Hornet's journey is full of moments where Farloom tries to assign her a role, a cage, or a limit. Defeating a sentinel is one more way she refuses to let the kingdom define where she may go. Chakra as a boss is especially interesting because she is also a cartographer, singer, and companion-like presence through the journey. She marks paths, sells maps, and fills unfamiliar areas with the comfort of orientation. If she becomes a boss encounter, the emotional tone changes from pure hostility to testing, misunderstanding, or warrior respect. A mapmaker who fights is not abandoning her role. She is showing that knowing the road and surviving the road are connected. Chakra's importance lies in how she makes Farloom readable. Without maps, the kingdom is a maze of threats. With her help, it becomes memory. So a fight involving Chakra carries the strange feeling of clashing with someone who has helped give shape to the world. That is very different from fighting a monster with no relationship to Hornet. It is a reminder that allies and obstacles are not always separate categories in Farloom. As a boss, Chakra also embodies disciplined movement. Cartography requires patience, courage, and repetition. A map is made by going where others may be lost. Her combat identity therefore does not come out of nowhere. She has always been a warrior of roots. The fight simply lets that truth step out from behind the map paper and sing with steel. Nihilith appears among the later bosses with a name that feels personal rather than descriptive. Some bosses are titles, like Last Judge or Father of the Flame. Nihilith sounds like an individual whose story may not be immediately explained, but whose presence has a particular weight. Names like this make Farloom feel populated by lives that exceed Hornet's knowledge. The power of a boss named Nihilith is mystery. Instead of telling us what the figure is through title alone, the name asks us to carry uncertainty. In a late-game context, that uncertainty fits the changed world. By Act 3, many encounters feel like remnants, distortions, or hidden truths revealed after the obvious pilgrimage is broken open. Nihilith belongs to that quieter field of questions. A personal name also changes the ethics of a fight. It is easier to think of a beastfly as a creature or a sentinel as a function. A named boss feels closer to a life. Hornet may still have to fight, but the name leaves a small mark. Farloom is full of beings who become obstacles because history has placed them there. Nihilith feels like one of those beings, carrying a story the road may only partly reveal. Bell-Eater is a wonderfully threatening name because it turns Farloom's central sound into food. Bells guide travel, open ways, summon beasts, mark shrines, and shape the pilgrimage. A creature that eats bells is not merely hungry, it consumes the kingdom's language of passage. That makes Bell-Eater feel like a direct threat to the Order of Farloom. The image is also strangely primal. Before bells can be holy, they are objects. Metal can be bitten, swallowed, broken, and silenced. Bell-Eater reduces sacred sound to matter. In a kingdom that treats ringing as signal and ritual, that reduction feels almost blasphemous. The boss stands as a reminder that every grand symbol still exists in a world of mouths. Fighting Bell-Eater, late in the story, carries a special satisfaction, because by then bells have become familiar companions. The sound of a bell can mean return, opening, station, or progress. A boss that threatens that sound attacks a kind of comfort the journey has built over many hours. Hornet is not defending an abstract system. She is defending the possibility of roads staying connected. Clover dancers belong to the late boss list with a name that feels delicate but not harmless. Clover suggests luck, greenery, and small growth. Dancers suggest grace and rhythm. Together they create the image of enemies who move beautifully, perhaps in pairs or patterns, turning a natural symbol into choreography. Like the cogwork dancers, they make combat musical, but with a softer, more organic flavour. The Clover dancers show how Act 3 can alter the meaning of beauty. A pretty name does not guarantee a gentle fight. Farloom often hides danger inside attractive forms, flowers that help and deceive, white purity around the cradle, golden halls above exploitation, songs that bind. Clover dancers fit this pattern. They may move with charm, but their dance still asks Hornet to answer with precision. There is something almost folk-like about them, as if an old meadow dance has become a trial. That makes them different from the Citadel's engineered elegance. Cogwork dancers are machinery performing art. Clover dancers feel like luck and growth performing danger. The difference matters because it gives each boss its own emotional colour, rather than folding all graceful enemies into one idea. Crawfather is tied by name to the craw creatures of Greymoor and Craw Lake. Father titles in Silksong often carry authority over a local group or faith, and Crawfather suggests patriarch, source, or elder of a crawling world. Greymoor's damp life gathers around him. Where Father of the Flame leads a cult of heat, Crawfather feels rooted in wetness, mud, and swarm. The Court of Craws already gives the Greymoor creatures a social feeling, and Crawfather extends that into boss form. The name makes the Craws feel less random. They have a father, or at least a figure named as one. That changes the fight from pest control into an encounter with the small kingdom's head. Farloom is full of nested authorities, divine grandmother, judges, conductors, kings, fathers, mothers, chefs, sentinels. Crawfather belongs to that hierarchy of strange titles. As a late boss, Crawfather may also feel like the return of Greymoor's rain-soaked life in a more concentrated shape. The early region's damp melancholy becomes a later challenge. That kind of return helps make the world feel circular. Hornet does not simply leave areas behind forever. Their deepest names can come back when the kingdom's hidden layers open. Crust King Khan is one of the grander late bosses because he is tied to the sands of Karak and the Old Order of Karak. A Crust King suggests an ancient ruler of shell, coral, desert and hardened life. Cain is not simply a local beast. He carries the weight of a lost power from before the current shape of Farloom. His presence makes the sands feel royal rather than empty. The tragedy of Crust King Cain is that kingship survives after the kingdom has changed beyond recognition. The sands of Karak were once tied to water, coral, a clear river, and flourishing life. Now the region is storm, sand, and memory. A king in such a place becomes a relic of authority, still dangerous because old rule does not fade gently. Hornet facing Khan is like facing a surviving crown under the dunes. This boss also widens the story beyond the citadel. Grandmother Silk may be central to Farloom's present crisis, but Crust King Khan reminds us that other powers once mattered. The map contains old civilizations under newer structures. Fighting Khan is not just a late challenge, it is an archaeological encounter with a political past that the main pilgrimage road may have tried to forget. Gur the Outcast carries immediate loneliness. Outcast means as being pushed away, rejected by a group, or forced to live beyond belonging. In a kingdom where so many bugs are sorted into roles, being cast out is a severe identity. Gur's boss fight therefore begins before the first strike in the sadness of the title. Outcast bosses often create a different emotional texture because their violence may come from exclusion rather than duty or hunger. Farloom is full of systems that decide who belongs. Pilgrims, sinners, workers, choir members, judges, prisoners. Someone named Outcast has been defined by those systems or by a smaller society within the kingdom. That definition can harden into rage, shame, or survival. Hornet herself is also an outsider in Farloom, though not an outcast in the same way. She has been captured and forced into a land that does not own her. Meeting Gur the Outcast may therefore carry a faint mirror. Not every outsider becomes free. Some become trapped at the edge, named by the rejection that shaped them. The fight holds that quiet warning. Lost Garmond is one of the late bosses that hurts, because the name contains a memory of warmth. Earlier, Garmond and Zaza can feel lively, companionable, or comedic. Lost Garment strips away some of that brightness. Lost does not always mean dead. It can mean misled, corrupted, separated, changed beyond easy recognition, or unable to return to the self others remember. The fight matters because Act 3 is not only about bigger enemies, it is about changed meanings. A name once associated with a pair becomes lonely. A figure once linked to humour becomes sorrowful. The kingdom's late state reaches into relationships, not just architecture. Lost Garment shows that the damage of Farloom can touch even the characters who once felt like relief from its darkness. There is also an implied absence in the name. If this is Lost Garment, where is Zaza, or what has become of the partnership? The boss carries that question without needing to answer it immediately. A paired identity broken into a lonely title can be more painful than a long explanation. Silksong's boss names often do this well. They let one adjective open a whole room of grief. Lost Lace is even heavier because Lace has been such an important rival. To fight Lace once is a duel. To fight her again near the cradle is destiny. To encounter Lost Lace suggests that something has gone wrong beyond ordinary rivalry. The proud, precise, elegant figure has been altered by the late consequences of Farloom's unravelling. Lost Lace is powerful because it changes the emotional contract of the earlier fights. Hornet and Lace were mirrors, rivals, and perhaps almost equals in a language only they fully understood. A lost version of Lace implies that this relationship has been damaged by forces larger than personal pride. The kingdom has reached into the duel and made it tragic. Fighting Lost Lace is therefore not simply a harder rematch, it is a mourning of what the rivalry used to be. The grace may remain, but the meaning behind it has shifted. Hornet is no longer just proving herself against another blade. She's facing the possibility that even the most self-possessed figures in Farloom can be pulled apart by the same silk, song, and memory that threatens everything else. Palestag has a name that echoes old Hollow Knight feelings. Pale suggests ancient light, royal memory, or the eerie whiteness associated with higher powers. Stag suggests travel, stations, and the beloved stagways of Hallownest. A boss named Palestag therefore carries a deep resonance even before its details are fully considered. It sounds like a travel spirit touched by pale history. If the Bell Beast is Farloom's living travel companion, Palestag feels like a darker or older reflection of the idea of passage. Stags in Hollow Knight are tied to roots, service, memory, and loneliness. A pale stag boss suggests that travel itself can become haunted. Roads remember who used them. Stations outlive their passengers. Creatures made for movement may be left behind when kingdoms fail. The beauty of a boss like Palestag lies in how much it can imply through association. It does not need to explain every connection to feel meaningful. Hollow Knight's worlds are built on echoes, pale light, old transport, stag-like forms, and late-game mystery all gather into a boss that feels like a half-remembered song from another kingdom, crossing into Farloom's night. Pinstress has a name that is sharp and elegant at once. Pin suggests needle, piercing, precision, and small pain. The suffix hints at a feminine title, perhaps a craftswoman, performer, or fighter, shaped around exact points. In a game where Hornet's own needle is central, a boss named Pinstress feels naturally intimate. She belongs to the world of fine violence. A fight with Pinstress can be imagined as a duel of tiny deadly intentions rather than heavy force. Some bosses overwhelm with size, Others command space through authority. Pinstress suggests detail, stitch, jab, and the fine line between sewing and stabbing. That makes her feel closely tied to Silksong's central language, where thread, needle, cloth, and combat all share the same symbolic family. The name also gives the encounter a slightly theatrical or social flavour. A pinstress might be associated with garments, tailoring, or presentation, turning domestic craft into combat identity. Farloom often does this. Chef becomes boss, dancer becomes weapon, architect becomes sacred figure, surgeon becomes horror. Pinstress fits that pattern beautifully. A tool of making becomes a tool of pain. Plasmified Zango immediately sounds transformed. Zango may be the personal name, but plasmified tells us something has happened. Plasmium, tied to wormways and strange alchemical material, suggests biological alteration, glowing substance, and unstable growth. A plasmified boss is not merely a stronger version. It is a changed body carrying evidence of contact with something dangerous. This kind of boss matters because it shows how Farloom's materials alter living beings. Silk is not the only transformative force. Flame, pollution, electricity, void, memory, and plasmium all have their own effects. Plasmified Zango belongs to the alchemical side of that pattern. The fight implies experiment, exposure, or survival gone wrong beneath the surface. There is a body horror softness in the word plasmified. It sounds almost clinical, as if someone might write it in a note, but the result is a living fight. That contrast makes the boss feel unsettling. Farloom's strangest dangers often begin as resources or studies. Then the material enters life, and life becomes a boss with a name that remembers what changed it. Shrine Guardian. Seth carries special weight because Seth was originally connected to real-world remembrance, a character preserved with care and affection. Inside the world of Silksong, the title Shrine Guardian already feels solemn. A guardian is not a tyrant or beast. A shrine is not merely a locked door. The name asks for respect before the fight even begins. Seth's role as a guardian gives the encounter a different emotional temperature from more hostile bosses. Guardians often fight because something must be protected, not because they hate the one who arrives. That makes them noble even when dangerous. Hornet meeting Seth can feel like approaching a sacred boundary, where combat becomes a form of recognition. The needle does not only defeat, it honours the seriousness of the figure standing there. The shrine setting also places Seth in Farloom's spiritual geography, without making him part of the Citadel's corruption. Not every sacred place in this kingdom is rotten. Some still hold dignity. Seth's presence helps keep the map from becoming cynical. Amid false forgiveness, exploited labour, haunted choirs and broken medicine, a shrine guardian can still feel sincere. Skarsinger Carmelita brings together tribe and song in a striking way. The Scar of Hunter's March are red, territorial, trap-making, and fierce. Skarsinger suggests that even this martial group has music, ritual, and named artistry. Carmelita as a personal name softens and sharpens the title at once. She's not just a Scar, she's a singer among them. This boss is fascinating because it reminds us that song is not owned by the Citadel. Farloom's grand holy system may use choir and melody as power, but other peoples have their own voices. A Skarsinger's song may be tribal, combative, or ancestral rather than institutional. That difference matters. The kingdom is full of sound, and not all sound belongs to the Golden Halls. Facing Carmelita may therefore feel like meeting Hunter's march again through culture rather than only traps. The Scar were never just ambushes. They had shrines, roots, and social behaviour. A named singer completes that impression. She gives the Red Tunnels a voice. The fight becomes one more proof that enemies in Silksong often carry societies behind them, even when the road only gives Hornet a few minutes in their presence. Tormented Trobiu, as the later form of Trobio, deserves a closer look because torment changes the meaning of performance. The first Trobio can feel flamboyant, perhaps vain, perhaps funny. Tormented Trobio suggests a performer unable to leave the stage even after the stage has become pain. That is a deeply Farloom idea. Songs continue after singers are ruined. Dances continue after dancers become machines. Shows continue after joy has been hollowed out. The fight is unsettling because it asks whether performance can become a prison. If a being is known for spectacle, what happens when suffering takes over the spectacle rather than ending it? Tormented Trobio may still move with dramatic energy, but the drama no longer feels freely chosen. The kingdom has a habit of turning roles into cages. Performer, judge, conductor, worker, sinner, guardian, mother, king. Each title can become a trap when the self beneath it is no longer allowed to rest. In that sense, Tormented Trobio is not only a rematch, it is a commentary on every role Farloom exaggerates until it hurts. The boss says that colour and flourish are not proof of freedom. A bright figure can suffer just as deeply as a silent one. Sometimes the loudest costume hides the worst wound. Watcher at the Edge has one of the most haunting boss names because it suggests position more than identity. The edge of what? The edge of Farloom, the edge of memory, the edge of the abyss, the edge of understanding, or the edge between kingdoms. A watcher does not necessarily act first. A watcher sees, waits, and remembers. That stillness can be more frightening than immediate aggression. Late in the journey, a boss called Watcher at the Edge feels like a final sentinel of uncertainty. After Hornet has climbed to the cradle, descended into the abyss, touched red memory and moved through old powers, there are still edges. The map may be drawn, but the world is not exhausted. A watcher at the edge suggests that something has been observing the boundaries all along, aware of what crosses from one state into another. The encounter also fits Hollow Knight's broader love of liminal figures. Some beings stand at thresholds between life and death, memory and present, kingdom and wilderness, sound and silence. Watcher at the Edge belongs to that family. It doesn't need the blunt authority of Last Judge. Its authority comes from placement. To stand at the edge and watch is to know that every journey has a border it cannot fully explain. Seen slowly, the Act 1 bosses have a special innocence even when they are dangerous. Moss Mother, Bell Beast, Savage Beastfly, Sister Splinter, Widow, Moorwing, Fourth Chorus, Lace, Phantom, Great Conch Flies, Last Judge, and Skull Tyrant all teach the first shape of Farloom before the full machinery is visible. They do not yet reveal the entire truth. Instead, they introduce the textures of the kingdom: moss, bone, bells, forest, rain, song, heat, judgment, and old death. That early order matters because it lets the world feel discovered rather than explained. Hornet does not begin with Grandmother Silk or the full horror of Whitewood. She begins with a mossy mother in a ruined chapel, then a bound beast in the marrow, then a town under thread, then arrival in the forge. The bosses are placed like stepping stones across a mystery. Each one gives just enough information to make the next region feel heavier. Moss Mother and Widow are especially strong as early mirrors. Both are feminine, both are tied to thread or nesting, and both turn shelter into danger. But Moss Mother feels natural, earthy, and almost accidental, while Widow feels social, deliberate, and curse-like. One occupies a ruined chapel because life has reclaimed it. The other holds a living town in silk. Together they show two sides of Farloom's binding power, the wild nest and the conscious snare. Bell Beast and Last Judge make another pair. Bell Beast is bound movement. Last Judge is blocked movement. The first must be freed so travel can open. The second must be overcome so the citadel can be entered. One is a living road trapped in silk. The other is a moral door armed with authority. Both fights are about passage, but they ask different questions. Can the road breathe again? Can the gate's right to judge be broken? Lace's first duel changes the scale of Act 1 because she's not a regional beast or static guardian. She's aware, she performs, she talks through motion, posture and pressure. Her arrival makes Farloom feel populated by agents with their own agendas, not just local hazards. After Lace, the journey cannot be only environmental. Someone elegant and dangerous has noticed Hornet, and being noticed in Farloom is rarely safe. Phantom and Skull Tyrant quietly expand the Act 1 mood backward into history. A phantom means something remains after its proper time. A Skull Tyrant means authority can survive in the language of bone. These bosses keep the early game from feeling only fresh and exploratory. Even near the beginning, the kingdom is crowded with leftovers. Hornet is new to Farloom, but Farloom is not new to sorrow. Great conch flies and savage beast fly keep the early boss list grounded in local ecology. This is important because a kingdom made only of divine and political symbols would feel too abstract. The large flies, beastly wings and shell-bodied creatures make the world breathe as an insect land. They remind us that danger can be ordinary. Not every boss needs to know the truth of Grandmother Silk. Some are alive, hungry, territorial, and large enough to matter. Act 2 changes the tone by bringing systems into focus. Broodmother, Cogwork Dancers, Lugali, Father of the Flame, First Sinner, the Four Brothers, Garmond and Zaza, Grandmother Silk, Groll, Lace at the Cradle, Raging Conchfly, Savage Beastfly in Far Fields, Second Sentinel, Chakra, Summoned Saviour, The Unravelled, Trobio, and Voltvirm all feel more socially arranged. They are not only creatures in places, they are tied to institutions, professions, rituals, relationships, and distortions of community. That is why Act 2 feels richer and more uneasy. A chef can be disgraced, a saviour can be summoned, a sinner can be first. Dancers can be built from cogs, a flame father can lead burning worship, a sentinel can hold a post, a surgeon's failure can unravel into a boss. The names themselves sound like roles in a kingdom that has assigned everyone a function, and then let those functions rot. Broodmother, Father of the Flame, and Grandmother Silk form a dark family of titles. One births or commands a brood, one leads a flame-centered community, one sits at the divine heart of the whole land. None of these parental names are simple. They do not promise safety. In Farloom, family language often carries power, hunger, protection, control and obligation all at once. Hornet, who carries her own complicated inheritance, keeps meeting warped versions of kinship. The unravelled and first sinner form a different pair. One is bodily failure, the other is moral labelling. Both show how Farloom turns suffering into a category. A body comes apart and becomes the unravelled. A being is named first sinner and becomes a symbol of guilt. The Citadel's world loves naming things because names make control easier. Hornet cuts through the names, but the sadness behind them remains. Cogwork dancers and Trobbio show the performance side of Act 2. One is mechanical elegance, the other theatrical personality. Their fights are not only about impact, they are about rhythm, display, and the strange beauty of danger arranged as art. Farloom is a kingdom where song can command bodies and where dancers can guard machines. A performer boss does not feel out of place here. It feels like a smaller version of their whole culture. Garmund and Zaza bring warmth into that same act, which helps the shape of the journey breathe. Their energy keeps Farloom from becoming all dread. They suggest that companionship can survive in odd forms, that not every pair is tragic from the beginning, and that some fights can carry almost playful force. That early brightness is part of why Lost Garmund later feels so wounded. The story first lets a name be lively before letting it be lost. Chakra's boss presence is also unusual because she's tied to orientation rather than obstruction. Most bosses make space harder to understand. Chakra helps space become readable, so a fight with her has the flavour of a sparring match with someone who knows the land intimately. She's not a stranger blocking a tunnel. She's a singer of roots, a warrior of maps, and perhaps one of the few figures who understands travel as both knowledge and survival. Voltvirm and Raging Conch Flies bring back the wild side of Act 2, but with stronger intensity than the early ecological bosses. Voltvirm adds sharp energy and old power. Raging Conchfly turns an earlier kind of creature into a more urgent threat. These fights help the act avoid becoming only institutional. Farloom's systems may dominate the story, but the land still has its own dangerous life outside laws and choirs. Lace at the Cradle is the Act 2 boss that most clearly feels like destiny closing. Unlike the first duel, which comes amid forge heat and early rivalry, the Cradle fight is surrounded by the summit's symbolism. It is not merely a rematch. It is the rival standing near the centre of everything. Lace's elegance now carries the weight of the kingdom's higher secret, and the fight feels like silk recognising silk under unbearable pressure. Grandmother Silk's boss role changes every earlier Silk image. The threads around Bellheart, the Weaver ruins, the Needle-in gates, the captured opening, the height flowers near the cradle, the medical bindings, and the haunted choir all begin to point backward toward her. A final boss is strongest when the journey has already been speaking its language long before the body appears. Grandmother Silk works because Farloom has been whispering her material from the first hours. The Act 3 bosses then turn the whole structure haunted. Bell-Eater, Clover Dancers, Crawfather, Crust King Khan, Gur the Outcast, Lost Garmund, Lost Lace, Nihilith, Palistag, Pinstress, Plasmified Zango, Shrine Guardian Seth, Scarsinger Carmelita, Tormented Trobbio, and Watcher at the Edge do not simply add more enemies. They reopen the map after it has been broken. They ask what remains when the first ending was not the end. Many Act 3 names sound like transformations rather than stable identities. Lost Garmund, Lost Lace, Plasmified Zango, Tormented Trobbio. These are not neutral titles. They tell us something happened to the person or creature. Farloom's late story is not merely introducing unknowns, it is showing damage done to already meaningful forms. The boss list itself becomes a record of change. Other Act 3 names sound ancient or ceremonial. Cross King Khan, Shrine Guardian Seth, Watcher at the Edge, Palace Stag, and Skarsinger Carmelita all feel like figures who belong to deeper traditions. The late game broadens from the Citadel's central problem into older orders, shrines, tribes, and border mysteries. That is a lovely structural move. Once the main holy machine cracks, other buried histories become easier to hear. Bell Eater is a strong Act 3 opener in spirit because it attacks the comfort of the travel system. By then, bells are not just props. They are how Farloom has been understood. They mark stations, shrines, gates, and motion. A boss that eats bells feels like a threat to memory and movement at once. It says that even the systems Hornet has come to rely on can be bitten into silence. Clover dancers provide an elegant contrast to that hunger. Their name feels small, lucky, and graceful rather than devouring. Yet they still belong among late bosses, which means late danger can wear a light-footed form. This is one of the things Silksong does well. It refuses to make darkness visually monotonous. A late boss can be green, pretty, and dance-like while still asking for full attention. Crawfather returns attention to Greymoor's damp underworld. The Craws could have remained local creatures around a lake, but giving them a father figure elevates them into a society with memory. Greymoor is not just rainy scenery. It contains courts, nests, and fathers. Crawfather makes the region's earlier strangeness feel more complete, as if a name that had been waiting under the water finally rises. Cross King Khan and the sands of Karak bring the strongest sense of lost sovereignty. Unlike the Citadel's living control, Khan feels like rule from another age. Fighting him is not a rebellion against the current system. It is a collision with a previous order that still has power in the ruins. That difference matters. Farloom's past is not all one past. It has several dead centres, and some of them still have crowns. Gur the Outcast and Nihilith are quieter because their names are less tied to public institutions. They feel personal, marginal, possibly wounded. That gives late Farloom some needed intimacy. After gods, kings, and systems, a named outcast or mysterious individual reminds us that the kingdom's damage is also private. Not every boss is a symbol visible from the Citadel. Some are solitary lives that ended up in the path of the needle. Palastag is one of the most evocative names because it points beyond Farloom without needing to leave it. Hollow Knight's memory of stagways and pale powers makes the name feel old, gentle, and mournful. A stag-like boss suggests travel as loneliness, service as endurance, and roots as grief. In a kingdom where the Bell Beast carries Hornet through stations, Palastag feels like an older echo of movement shaped by another kind of history. Pinstress and plasmified Zango make a fascinating pair because both are about bodies changed by craft or material. Pinstress turns the sharp, domestic world of pins and fabric into combat. Plasmified Zango turns exposure or transformation into identity. One feels precise and tailored, the other feels altered and unstable. Together, they show two ways Silksong connects tools to flesh, through skill and through mutation. Shrine Guardian. Seth stands apart because the title asks for reverence. In a kingdom where many sacred systems are corrupt, Seth feels like a reminder that holiness can still be sincere. Not every shrine is a trap. Not every guardian is a tyrant. This matters because it keeps Farloom morally alive. If every sacred thing were rotten, the story would become simple. Seth gives it a point of tenderness and respect. Scar singer Carmelita gives Hunter's March a late voice. The Scar were already memorable as red, trap-making, territorial figures, but a named singer deepens them into a culture. Carmelita suggests that their world contains not only ambush and defense, but music. That detail matters in a game where song is often associated with the Citadel. Her presence says that song can belong to tribes, rebels, hunters, and local memories too. Tormented Trobbio is sad because it shows what happens when colour becomes anguish. Trobbio's earlier theatrical flavour may feel bright, strange, and self-loving. Tormented Trobbio keeps the name but changes the emotional light behind it. The performer remains, yet the performance is no longer playful. It has become something the suffering must wear. In a world of rules, torment can become costume. Watcher at the Edge feels almost like the boss list exhaling at the border. After so much motion, a Watcher is stillness. After so many named roles inside the kingdom, the Edge suggests outside, threshold, or final uncertainty. This boss does not need to explain the entire mystery. Its power is in letting the mystery remain. Some figures do not guard answers. They guard the fact that answers end somewhere. Another way to understand the bosses is through the kind of space each one controls. Moss Mother controls a small chapel nest. Bell Beast controls a transit route by being trapped within it. Widow controls a town's stillness. Last Judge controls a gate. Cogwork dancers control a mechanical rhythm. The Unravelled controls medical fear. Grandmother Silk controls the meaning of silk itself. Each fight is a place learning how to say no. Hornet's victory, then, is not only damage dealt, it is space reopened. After Moss Mother, the chapel's path changes. After Bell Beast, travel awakens. After Widow, Bellheart breathes. After Last Judge, the Citadel can be entered. After bosses like Father of the Flame or Crust King Khan, hidden histories yield tools, routes, or understanding. The fights are keys, but not in a boring sense. They are arguments with places that have become closed. The bosses also differ in how much pity they invite. It is easier to pity Bell Beast because it is bound. It is easy to feel sorrow around Lost Lace or the Unravelled because their names imply damage. It is harder to pity a judge or a tyrant, though even they may be trapped by roles. A good boss list needs that range. If every enemy deserves mercy, the road becomes emotionally exhausting. If none do, the world becomes flat. Lace may be the best example of a boss who resists simple pity. She's not helpless. She's not a victim in the same way as a bound beast. She is proud, sharp, and sometimes dangerous by choice. But she is still shaped by Farloom's higher structures. The more she returns, the harder it becomes to see her only as an obstacle. Rivalry turns into recognition, and recognition turns into grief when the word lost reaches her name. Grandmother Silk resists simple judgment in another way. She is terrifying because of what Silk does across the kingdom, but she is also central to systems that tried to control her. The Citadel's history complicates blame. Was the kingdom broken because of her, because of those who bound her, because of the songs used to manage her, or because every attempt at control created another wound? The boss does not answer with a clean sentence, it answers with the whole map. This is why the boss list feels more literary than it first appears. Names are chosen like little poems. Moss Mother, Bell Beast, Last Judge, First Sinner, Summoned Saviour, The Unravelled. Bell-Eater, Lost Lace, Shrine Guardian Seth, Watcher at the Edge. Each name carries a mood before the fight starts. The words prepare the imagination. By the time Hornet enters the arena, the title has already cast a shadow. The optional bosses help the kingdom feel alive beyond the main road. A required boss can seem like destiny, but an optional boss feels like a secret the world did not need to show. Finding bosses off the central route makes Farloom wider and more personal. It suggests that the kingdom is full of powers that exist whether Hornet seeks them or not. The main pilgrimage is only one thread in a much larger weave. That optional quality is especially important for figures like Shrine Guardian Seth, Crust King Khan, or strange late variants. They can feel like hidden stories rather than required chapters. The result is a map that rewards curiosity with character, not only treasure. A secret boss is a room saying, "There is more here than the road demanded." For a sleep journey, that thought is pleasant. Beyond every main path, some quiet name may be waiting. The repeated bosses and variants keep the world from being static. Savage Beastfly appears in more than one context. Lace changes across encounters. Trobio becomes tormented. Garmin becomes lost. Zango becomes plasmified. These changes give the boss list a sense of time. Farloom is not a gallery where enemies wait unchanged forever. It is a kingdom where situations worsen, relationships shift, and names acquire scars. There is also a musical idea inside repeated bosses. A melody can return in a new key. Lace's first fight is one arrangement. Lost Lace is another. Trobio's performance is one arrangement. Tormented Trobio is another. Great Conchflies and Raging Conchfly echo across intensity. Repetition here is not simply reuse, it is variation, and variation is one of the old ways music tells a story. The boss arenas matter almost as much as the bosses themselves. A fight in a chapel feels different from a fight in a forge. A fight at the Grand Gate feels different from one in a thicket. The same attack pattern would carry another mood under rain, lava, gold, cold, or void. Silksong understands that boss identity is partly environmental. Moorwing needs Greymoor's wet heaviness. Father of the Flame needs wisp thicket's glow. Grandmother Silk needs the cradle's strange purity. This attention to place keeps the fights from floating outside the story. Even when a boss has little direct dialogue, the room talks. Silk threads across a town say what Widow has done. Medical clutter says what the unravelled means. Gears and platforms say why cogwork dancers move as they do. Coral Desert says why Crust King Khan feels old. The shrine says why Seth should be approached with respect. Some bosses are frightening because they are too alive. Broodmother, Crawfather, Great Conchflies, Beastflies, and Bell-Eater belong to that physical category. They bite, swarm, charge, rage, and occupy space with bodily insistence. Others are frightening because they are too organised. Last Judge, Second Sentinel, Cogwork Dancers, Summoned Saviour, Shrine Guardian Seth. The first kind feels like nature pressing close. The second feels like a system putting on armour. Then there are bosses frightening because they are too changed. The unravelled, plasmified Zango, Lost Lace, Lost Garmond, and Tormented Trobio carry alteration in their names. Their danger is not only what they do in the arena, it is what must have happened before the arena. They make the mind imagine a previous self, then feel the distance between that self and the figure now attacking. Silksong's bestiary of bosses also uses scale carefully. Some names feel local and small, like Pinstress or Lugoli. Some feel regional, like Crawfather or Father of the Flame. Some feel ancient, like Krusking Khan or Voltvium. Some feel cosmic or divine, like Grandmother Silk and Watcher at the Edge. Moving among those scales keeps the journey from becoming predictable. Hornet can fight a disgraced chef and a divine grandmother in the same kingdom, and somehow both belong. The humour of certain bosses is not a weakness. Disgraced Chef Lugoli, Groll the Great, Trobio, and even Great Conchflies carry a bit of the world's odd smile. Hollow Knight has always understood that darkness needs little absurdities to feel real. A miserable kingdom where nobody is strange in a funny way would be less believable, not more. These bosses let the world grin through cracked teeth. The sorrow of other bosses balances that humour. The Unravelled, Lost Lace, Lost Garmond, Gur the Outcast, Palastag, and perhaps even Bell Beast carry loneliness or damage. Their names slow the mind down. They ask not only how to win, but what kind of life produced this encounter. That is why the boss list can support a long quiet telling. It is not just a challenge catalogue, it is a row of little tragedies, jokes, rituals and echoes. If the bosses were arranged around Hornet's inner journey, Moss Mother would be the first lesson in disturbance. Bell Beast would be the lesson in freeing what is bound. Widow would be the lesson in cutting a town loose. Lace would be the lesson in rivalry. Last Judge would be the lesson in refusing false authority. Grandmother Silk would be the lesson in confronting origin. Lost Lace would be the lesson that even rivalry can be wounded. Watcher at the Edge would be the lesson that some borders remain unknowable. This inward reading does not replace the map, it rests underneath it. Hornet travels through real locations, fights real enemies, and gains real passage. But stories like this always work in two directions. The outward road climbs through Farloom. The inward road asks Hornet what kind of silk-born being she will become. Every boss stands on both roads at once. That dual road is why bosses like Chakra, Lace, Garmond and Zaza and Seth feel different from anonymous monsters. They carry relationship. They make the kingdom less lonely even when the fight is serious. A rival, mapmaker, pair of companions or shrine guardian leaves a social impression. Hornet is not merely cutting through a hostile land. She is meeting people, and some meetings happen with blades. The boss list also gives Farloom a sense of many belief systems colliding. The Citadel has choirs, judges, conductors, vaults and Grandmother Silk. Wisp Thicket has flame worship. Hunter's March has scar singers and beast chapels. Karak has an old king and order. The shrine has Seth. The slab has punishment disguised as forgiveness. Every boss tied to worship or authority makes the kingdom feel theologically crowded. This is why a simple phrase like every boss is bigger than it sounds. It means every guardian of a road, every warped profession, every local godling, every survivor of an old order, every changed friend, every creature large enough to make Hornet stop. Each one is a doorway into a different Farloom. Taken together, they make the kingdom feel almost impossibly layered. The first hours of the boss journey are also careful about teaching trust. Moss Mother teaches that even a gentle-looking chapel can move suddenly. Bell Beast teaches that a terrifying body may be trapped rather than evil. Savage Beastfly teaches that local wildlife can be sacred in its own rough way. Widow teaches that a town's suffering may have one thread at its centre. These early lessons shape how every later boss is understood. Hornet learns not to assume that danger has only one cause, that patience becomes useful when the titles grow stranger. A disgraced chef sounds funny until one remembers that kitchens are places of care, hunger, and social order. A first sinner sounds moral until one wonders who created the category of sin. A summoned saviour sounds holy until one sees that salvation can arrive with claws. Silksong often puts a gentle or familiar word beside a threatening one, then lets the fight live in the tension between them. The bosses also make the idea of pilgrimage more uneasy. Pilgrims in Farloom climb toward the citadel believing that the upward road has meaning. Yet the bosses on that road are not simply tests placed by a benevolent system. Some are natural obstacles, some are victims of the system, some are guardians of systems that should be questioned. The pilgrimage asks for faith, but the boss fights keep showing why faith without understanding can be dangerous. Hornet's difference from an ordinary pilgrim matters here. She does not kneel before a title because it sounds sacred. She does not accept a judge because it stands near a gate. She does not accept a saviour because it has been summoned. She does not accept a grandmother because the kingdom has organised itself around her silk. Hornet's boss journey is partly a refusal to let Farloom's words decide Farloom's truth. This refusal gives the fights their sharp, emotional spine. The bosses are not only asking whether Hornet can survive, they're asking whether she can keep interpreting the world for herself. A weaker mind might accept the Citadel's categories: sinner, judge, saviour, worker, pilgrim, heretic, guardian. Hornet keeps moving through those names with suspicion. Her needle becomes a way of cutting through language as much as silk. The smaller comic bosses are important because they interrupt that seriousness before it becomes heavy. Grohl the Great, Lugoli, Trobio, Great Conchflies, and Garmund and Zaza all carry oddness in different flavours. Some are boastful, some theatrical, some absurdly physical, some charming. These names let Farloom remain bug-like and strange. A world of insects should have a little awkward humour crawling through its tragedy. The grand bosses, meanwhile, give the kingdom height. Last Judge, Grandmother Silk, Crust King Khan, Watcher at the Edge, and perhaps Voltvium all make the map feel larger than Hornet's immediate need. They suggest law, divinity, old rule, border mystery, and ancient power. Without them, Farloom might feel like a collection of local troubles. With them, it feels like a country where every small fight belongs somewhere under a vast ceiling. The tragic altered bosses give the journey depth. Lost Lace, Lost Garmund, Tormented Trobio, the Unravelled, and Plasmified Zango all imply a before and after. The fight begins with a question. What were they before this form? That question is more haunting than simple aggression. It allows the boss to be frightening and mournful at the same time. Hornet is not only defeating what stands there, she is witnessing what Farloom has done to it. Even the bosses that seem least personal can become memorable through sound. The heavy impact of a beast, the imagined ring around Bell Eater, the buzzing pressure of conch flies, the rhythm of dancers, the implied song of Carmelita, the choral force of fourth chorus, the whisper around a phantom. Silksong's boss names make the ear work before any music is heard. The kingdom is built from sound, so the names themselves almost hum. Movement gives each boss another identity. Lace slices through space like a rival who knows exactly where she wants to be. Cogwork dancers move like machines taught to be beautiful. Clover dancers suggest lighter steps, perhaps luck turned into rhythm. Bell Beast feels massive and grounded. Savage Beastfly feels wild and aerial. The Unravelled feels like motion that should not be happening at all. Bosses become memorable because their bodies speak. The boss aftermaths are just as important as the fights. Bell Beast becomes a travel companion. Bellheart wakes after Widow. A lantern comes from the flame. Tools, crests, openings, memories, and altered towns follow many victories. This gives the fights moral consequence. A boss is not simply a wall with health. It is often a knot in the world, and after the knot loosens, the surrounding place exhales. Some boss victories may feel less triumphant than necessary. Defeating the Unravelled likely does not erase the horror of Whitewood. Facing First Sinner does not heal the whole system of guilt. Fighting Crust, King Khan does not restore Karak's Lost River. Some encounters open a path but leave the wound visible. That restraint is part of the atmosphere. Hornet can change things, but not every broken place becomes whole because one battle ends. Other victories are cleaner in feeling, and that contrast matters. Freeing Bellheart from Widow has warmth. Gaining passage after Last Judge carries relief. Meeting a guardian like Seth can feel solemn rather than dirty. These moments keep the boss journey from becoming only decay. Farloom is dark, but not hopeless. Some fights release pressure instead of only exposing damage. The boss roster also uses loneliness carefully. Phantom is lonely because it suggests absence. Gur the Outcast is lonely because the title says rejection. Palastag is lonely because travel creatures often outlive their roots. Watcher at the Edge is lonely because watching from a border implies distance from everyone else. This loneliness connects to Hornet, who travels through Farloom with fierce independence but is never completely untouched by isolation. Partnership works as the opposite force. Garmond and Zaza, the Four Brothers, Cogwork dancers, Clover dancers, perhaps even groups like Great Conch Flies, all show bodies moving in relation. Their fights require attention to more than one rhythm. More importantly, they suggest that identity can be shared. A pair or group boss asks what happens when danger comes not from one strong figure but from coordination. That theme of coordination returns in the idea of chorus. Fourth chorus, Skarsinga Carmelita, the choir, the Nidolin, and the Citadel's melodies all suggest that many sounds can become one force. Hornet's own movement often stands against that collective pressure. She is a solo instrument in a kingdom obsessed with ensembles. Bosses tied to song make that contrast especially clear. The most unsettling bosses are those whose titles sound virtuous. Summoned Saviour, Last Judge, Shrine Guardian Seth, maybe even Grandmother Silk. These names should imply protection, order, care, or holiness. Sometimes they do, sometimes they do not. Silksong's intelligence lies in refusing a single answer. A guardian may be sincere, a judge may be cruel, a mother may be divine and dangerous, a saviour may be a threat. This moral ambiguity keeps the boss journey calm enough for reflection. If every boss were plainly evil, the story would be flatter. If every boss were secretly innocent, the story would become predictable in another way. Instead, each one sits somewhere on a wide scale between beast, victim, functionary, rival, ruler, guardian, and mystery. Hornet does not need perfect judgment before every fight. She needs clarity in motion. There is also a quiet craft logic running through many boss names. Pinstress, Cogwork dancers, disgraced chef Lugoli, the architects behind the core, the surgeons behind Whitewood, and even weaver-linked figures all point toward making. Cooking, dancing, stitching, engineering, healing, and weaving are creative acts. In Farloom, creative acts can become dangerous when trapped inside corrupt systems. The world is made, but not always kindly. Bosses tied to animals and insects carry another kind of truth. Moss Mother, Beast Flies, Conch Flies, Crawfather, Brood Mother, Bell Eater, and Vault Worm feel bodily and ecological. They remind us that no matter how many religious systems Farloom builds, the kingdom remains a bug kingdom with hunger, wings, shells, mandibles, nests, and swarms. The sacred and the biological are never far apart. The bosses tied to royalty or authority show what happens when hierarchy hardens. Crust King Khan, Last Judge, Second Sentinel, Grandmother Silk, and First Sinner all imply ranks. Some rule, some guard, some are judged, some are named guilty. Farloom's map is vertical, and its boss titles are vertical too. There is always something above, something below, someone allowed through, someone punished at the door. The late lost bosses make the vertical map collapse inward. Lost Lace and Lost Garment are not simply above or below Hornet. They are emotional returns. They bring earlier relationships into the changed late world, proving that the endgame is not only about reaching new places, it is also about seeing old names under new damage. That is often more frightening than a completely unknown monster. Bosses like Nihilith and Watcher at the Edge preserve unanswered mystery. Not every name is explained by profession, family role, animal type, or institution. Some names remain personal and opaque. This is good for the world. A fully explained map would feel smaller. A few bosses should remain like lights seen far off in fog, distinct enough to remember, distant enough to keep the imagination awake. The journey through every boss can therefore be imagined as a long descent into nuance. At first, a boss may seem like a creature to beat. Then it becomes a local story, then a social role, then a theological argument, then a memory, then a damaged friend. By the end, the word boss almost feels too simple. These encounters are the places where Farloom stops whispering and speaks with its whole body. Hornet's calm under pressure is what lets all these voices be heard. She does not explain herself much. She does not need to. Her silence gives the bosses room to define the world around her. A loud hero might drown out Farloom's strangeness. Hornet's focused presence lets the kingdom remain eerie, funny, cruel, lovely, and unresolved. She cuts through the road, but she does not overtalk it. That is why the boss list works so well for a slow night journey. It has rhythm without requiring hurry. A moss chapel, a bell beast, a red march, a rainy wing, a thread-bound town, a forge duel, a gate judge, a flame father, a mechanical dance, a medical horror, a divine silk mother, a lost rival, a shrine guardian, a king under sand, a watcher at the edge. Each image can drift into the next like rooms passed by lamplight. The music around these bosses matters even when spoken of quietly. A boss theme is not only excitement, it gives a body to the encounter's mood. Lace needs music that can feel elegant and dangerous. A beast needs weight. A judge needs pressure. A dancer needs rhythm. A lost friend needs a sound that remembers what came before without fully returning to it. In a kingdom named for song, the music of a fight becomes another part of its lore. Silence matters too. The pause before a boss moves can feel like an inhale. The room may have dripping water, distant bells, furnace heat, rain, or the hollow quiet of a shrine. Before the first strike, the place is already speaking. That is why so many Silksong bosses stay in the mind as images rather than only patterns. The arena, the name, the sound and the first movement arrive together. Repeated encounters gain power because the mind brings memory into the room. Lace is not the same when she returns because Hornet is not the same, and neither is Farloom. A beastfly in one place is not the same as a beastfly in another. Trobio before torment is not tormented Trobio after the kingdom's deeper wound opens. The repeated form becomes a measuring tool. It shows how far the road has changed. That is the hidden comfort of walking through every boss slowly. The fights may be hard in the moment, but from a distance they become a map of growth. What once felt overwhelming becomes readable. What once seemed random becomes part of a place. Hornet's journey through bosses is also the journey from confusion to recognition, from being thrown into Farloom to understanding the strange music of its dangers. The Act 3 boss list as a whole changes the emotional meaning of Silksong's fights. Early bosses introduce places, middle bosses expose systems, late bosses transform memory, Bell Eater threatens sound, Lost Lace twist rivalry, Crust King Khan reopens ancient rule, Shrine Guardian Seth restores dignity, Scarsinger Carmelita gives a tribe a voice, and Watcher at the Edge leaves the map with mystery. The final stretch is not only harder, it is more haunted by names already carrying history. It is also important to notice how many bosses come in families of meaning. Mothers and fathers appear again and again. Moss Mother, Brood Mother, Father of the Flame, Crawfather, Grandmother Silk. Authority figures gather around them. Last Judge, Second Sentinel, Crust King Khan, Shrine Guardian Seth. Performers and artists cross the path. Lace, Cogwork Dancers, Clover Dancers, Trobio, Tormented Trobio, Scarsinger Carmelita, Pinstress. The whole boss list becomes a social map. Farloom is not only full of monsters, it is full of roles. Those roles are often damaged. A mother may be protective or monstrous. A father may lead a cult or a swarm. A judge may guard a cruel gate. A chef may become disgraced. A dancer may be mechanical. A saviour may need to be fought. A guardian may still be honourable. That variety keeps the bosses from becoming one note. The kingdom is sick, but not every figure is sick in the same way. Hornet's own identity sits at the centre of all these encounters. She is not a blank wanderer. She is princess, hunter, child of Hera, kin to Silk, stranger to Farloom, and a fighter who speaks more with motion than explanation. Every boss reflects one side of her situation. Mothers reflect lineage, judges reflect imposed authority, dancers reflect precision, beasts reflect instinct, machines reflect systems, lost figures reflect what could happen if identity is pulled apart. The bosses also make Silksong's title feel earned. Silk appears in bindings, bodies, mothers, needles, pinstresses, weavers, and Grandmother Silk herself. Song appears in choruses, singers, bells, choirs, conductors, vault melodies, and performance. The bosses are not random names placed under a title. They are the title broken into living trials. Hornet fights through silk that binds and song that commands, until she can decide what her own movement means inside both. What makes these encounters calming to think through, even when they are difficult, is that each one has a place in the larger rhythm. Moss Mother is the damp beginning. Bell Beast is the first great release. Widow is a town breathing again. Lace is rivalry with grace. Last judge is the gate's accusation. The unravelled is medicine gone wrong. Grandmother Silk is the divine centre. Lost lace is beauty harmed by the final act. Watcher, at the edge, is the unanswered dark beyond the map. None of the bosses need to be reduced to one fact. They can be held as little stories. A creature in a chapel, a beast in silk, a town under thread, a wing over rain, a dancer made of gears, a chef fallen into disgrace, a flame father in a thicket, a saviour whose title cannot be trusted, a guardian at a shrine, a king under sand, a rival lost in the web. Each one gives Farloom another texture, another pressure, another breath. And now, as the road grows quieter, the boss journey can settle into memory. Let Moss Grotto soften around Moss Mother. Let the marrow ring with the bell beast's freed strength. Let Shellwood keep Sister Splinter among its thorns. Let Bellheart wake after the widow's silk is cut. Let Greymoor reign around Morwing and Crawfather. Let deep docks glow behind Lace's first duel. Let the grand gate stand behind the last judge. Let the citadel turn with cogwork dancers and whisper with old melodies. Let Wisp Thicket keep the father of the flame's embers. Let Whitewood remember the unravelled with a shiver. Let the cradle hold Lace, Grandmother Silk, and the white flowers at the top of the climb. Let the sands of Karak keep Crust King Khan beneath coral and storm. Let the slab, the abyss, the weave nests, the hidden chapels, and the old memories hold the stranger late bosses in their quiet corners. Let every name rest where it belongs. So rest now with Farloom's trials softened into a long, slow map. Hornet has crossed mothers, beasts, judges, chefs, dancers, sentinels, singers, kings, guardians, rivals, and phantoms. Some were cruel. Some were only defending a home. Some were lost. Some were sacred. Some were ridiculous in the way only this world can be. Together they make the kingdom feel alive, not because every boss explains everything, but because every boss leaves a shape in the dark. Let those shapes fade gently now, like bells heard from very far away.